to be covering a topic related to how to get started with customizing the SalesLogix mobile platform. And if you've had any experience with looking at mobile so far and trying to customize it, you'll know right off the bat it's unlike anything you've ever done with SalesLogix before. It's all JavaScript. It's something that you will use a text editor a lot to customize, which means that it'll be a little bit reminiscent of if you've dealt with SalesLogix for a lot of years, of kind of the pre-version 6 days where you just kind of had to know what to type. And that can be frustrating to get started with because you don't have a lot of things to kind of help you along the way, and it's something that's completely foreign and different than what you're used to. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to look at all the things that you'll need to do to get started with customizing it. That, in my experience, has been the biggest barrier to entry, is just getting started. There's a lot of things you got to do to set up an environment, and then even to know what to even do to begin. And so the hope is that after we're done today, you'll at least know how to set up a development environment. You'll at least know some of the beginning steps of how to get started with it, and you'll know at least where to look to get some help to get you a little further. So if you've installed mobile, which likely many of you have, there's a bundle that you install in Application Architect, and you might go and look at that portal that it installs in Application Architect and find that you're not really sure what to do with it. It's unlike the different portals that are in SalesLogix. You don't have quick forms, you don't have any kind of visual editors and things like that. You just have this portal with a bunch of things in its support files folder. And if you deploy that, you'll see that nothing that looks all that familiar. You can go into the content in JavaScript and look at some of this stuff, and it just all looks like just a big mess of code without any kind of formatting to it. If I actually turn off word wrap here, you'll see that this is all just on one big old line. And what's happened there is the code has been minified. Minified meaning that it's been made as small as possible, so it's the smallest payload to get to a mobile device. All the white space has been removed. Things that make it nicely formatted has been removed in an attempt to make the file as small as possible. And obviously this isn't something that you can customize. It just wouldn't be very easy or fun to attempt to do anything like that. So what we're going to do is, in order to customize it, we need to set up a development environment. And that'll be a little bit different. That's not a bundle. We're not even going to use Application Architect at all in that process. So let's look at how we go about doing that. Now, to set up a development environment, it really requires getting the source code for a couple of different things from GitHub. And we're going to talk about the intended way, and then we're going to talk about an easier way. And as Brianna mentioned at the beginning, and as you know, when you signed up for this webcast, we're going to be looking at a tool that automates some of this setup process for you so that you can just get right into writing code and not have to go through a lot of manual steps to get to that point in the first place. So if we look at GitHub and we search for Argos SDK and Argos SalesLogix, these are the two things that make up the mobile environment. Argos SDK is a framework that Sage created that is meant to create this mobile application framework. And Argos SalesLogix is the SalesLogix application built on top of that framework. Now, for us to be able to create a development environment, we need to get the source from both of those. And then on the Argos SDK repository, there's a wiki area here, and we can look at let's see, somewhere in here it talks about setting up a new environment. Maybe that's on the Argos SalesLogix, or maybe it's even down here. Regardless, it's a lot of steps. I think actually it's on the Argos SalesLogix repository here. You'll find that it talks about downloading the source or doing a git pull to get them and setting up a certain directory structure. all of that just to get to the point where you can do any customization at all. You have to have this development environment because, like I said, when you're looking at the deployed mobile, you're looking at a minified version of that, not something you want to work with. Okay, so let's look at an easy way to do this. Like I said, the Argos SalesLogix repository down here at the bottom, it does outline the steps to do this. But we're going to look at this tool called the SalesLogix Mobile Developer Toolkit, which has a couple of different things that will make your life easier when working with the mobile product. This is a free thing that from Customer Effects. It's actually open source. The source is available on GitHub, and you're free to take a look at the source and contribute if you'd like. But to get this tool, you go to the customereffects.com website and then go to Power to Software, and you'll see a link for SalesLogix Mobile Developer Toolkit. So you can watch a video and read some other information about it, but if you want to just install it, you just click the link down here at the bottom, and it'll start a click once application and install it. And then once it's installed, you'll have this simple little window here that just gives you a few different functions. Now, the first thing we want to do, as I said, is create our mobile development environment. So I'm going to use that option right here. And before I do this, I should mention a couple of different things. I'm working on a machine that does not even have SalesLogix installed. I'm getting a little bit of echo. I'm not sure if others are hearing that.
Yeah, Ryan, we are hearing a little bit of an echo.
Let's see. Okay. Well, I'll continue on. If that echo comes back, I'm not hearing it now, so we'll figure out if it comes back. So now I just wanted to mention though, I'm using a machine that does not even have SalesLogix installed. You don't need SalesLogix installed to work with the mobile product. And essentially all you need is something that can run a website and an SData portal. And the SData portal for what I'm going to be working with is I'm just going to use the public Sage SData portal. The Sage has a public demo site for the SalesLogix eval system, and I'm going to be using that SData which I commonly do for my development unless I need custom things from properties and entities in the system that I'm working with. So I'm going to use this option here called Create Dev Environment. And if I click that, I have two options of depending on which version of mobile that I'm working with. We're going to stick for this purposes what we're doing here with mobile 1.2. If people are using mobile, that's likely the version that they're using now. And I need to choose where I'm going to put this development environment. I'm just going to stick it right on my desktop. And now I have a few other options here. I have an option to include something called Argos sample. The reason why that's even an option there is because if you've attempted to start working with customizing the mobile product, you've found that there's not a lot of documentation. And so because JavaScript is typically something you kind of have to know what to type before you type it, Argos sample is a sample customization provided by Sage that allows you to kind of see some examples of customization. And that's really useful if you're getting started, to actually have some sample things to look at. You can look at that and say, oh, hey, well, they changed this field or added this. How did they do that? And you have the source to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and just include that in our development environment as well. Now, including it or not makes no difference to your customizations. It's not like you're going to have this Argos sample stuff mixed in with your customizations. So you don't need to worry about including that. Say, well, this is a customer development environment, and I don't want to deliver these things to my customer or to the business. And it's not going to be that way, and we'll look at that when it's done. And this last option here we'll come back to once we get to the point where we're going to look at the website itself. So I'm going to click the button to create the development environment. And now what it's doing is it's downloading the source code for the Argos SDK from GitHub. When it's done with that, it's going to download the Argos SalesLogix code from GitHub. It's going to configure all the directories in the right spots and get it so that it's all ready to use. And at this point, it's done. At this point, we have a fully working development environment. So those manual steps that we would have had to do, that's already done for us. We have this working environment. I can look here and I see the Argos SDK is present. We have the Argos SalesLogix and also the Argos sample. So one of my favorite parts of this toolkit is it makes it so that you don't even need to configure IIS to be able to run the website. It uses a small web server, the same web server that runs from Visual Studio. If you've ever created a web project in Visual Studio and you run it, it runs in a little mini web server that you see down in the tray. It's the same web server here that this tool allows us to use to run our website. This shortcut here, if I were to, I'm going to drag that a little wider and it keeps dragging the column. Well, we'll forget about that. This little shortcut right here, what it allows me to do if I run this, I can see I have two things installed here. Argos SalesLogix, which is the normal SalesLogix mobile client, and then Argos sample, which is that sample customization that we chose to install when we created our mobile developer environment. So if I just want to run the base mobile client, I can just click right here. I'm going to start the development configuration of that. And here it is. I didn't do anything with IIS or anything. All I did was I ran that Mobile Developer Toolkit, clicked the option to create a development environment, and then I ran that shortcut. And so we have not only a working development environment, I didn't even have to go to IIS and set anything up. So you'll notice down here in the tray, we have this thing called IIS Express that's running. And if I click to view the websites on it, I'll see that one of them is configured to run that directory that I created as a website. So this is using the default development configuration, which means that it's pointing already to the public Sage SData portal. So I don't even have SData installed on this machine either. So I can click admin, sign in, and here we go. This is a working development environment. I can see all the normal stuff here, and it all works great. The other thing I can do is run the Argos sample if I want to see what those customizations look like. So I'm going to log into this one now. And I'll see, well, I got one new thing that's down here that's new. I can go into accounts and see some things that look different than normal. It's yellow up here. I have this say hello and other things that are custom that are brought in through this Argos SalesLogix. So let's talk real quick here about how these customizations come into play. If I look in that Argos sample, I don't have a lot of files in here. If I look in my source folder here, I just have a few handful of different things compared to if I look in my Argos SalesLogix and look in the source, I got quite a bit more going on in there. The way that this works is this Argos sample is layered on top of the Argos SalesLogix system. So you take the out-of-the-box mobile product, and we've layered this set of customizations on top of it. So we can say, remove that field, add this field, change this label, do all these different things, yet we've not even touched the out-of-the-box code. And we'll look at how that comes into play a little bit here. But that's one thing that's important to notice, that these things in the products folder, we have the Argos SalesLogix, all these other products that I'll create. Products meaning is kind of like a set of customizations. Argos sample is a product for the Argos SDK, which sits on top of Argos SalesLogix in our case here. So a lot of the things like the configuration files will kind of refer back to the base system, and the Mobile Developer Toolkit recognizes that I have those two different products and lets me choose which one I want to run. It's running the same mobile system. It's just difference of what customizations it's loading, and really all that comes down to is a difference in URL. You'll see I have here the default mobile system. My URL refers to index-dev.html. The sample stuff gets loaded because it says in this file right here, index-dev-sample.html, it has all the things to wire up those customizations. So that's how you can use your development environment to, I'm going to do customizations for the business, but yet it doesn't get affected by things in this sample product that I've installed. And I can even create a product that's called testing, where I can play around with stuff, and it doesn't get touched with the stuff that's the real business customizations because they're separated as these different products. So let's just take a look real quick at the source of that Argos SalesLogix. Now I can go into this source here and look at things like go into account and look at this detail file right here. And now the way that these files are a little bit hard to read at first, but you'll get used to looking at them after you've messed around with them a few times. But essentially these files are all constructed using an object literal notation for JavaScript. An object literal notation, if you've ever seen JSON where it has in curly braces a list of label and value pairs. So for example, I have my account. If you've ever looked at the raw S-data feeds for an account, for example, you'll have the label, which is the field name, and then the value for that field. And essentially that's what we're looking at right here, is this object literal notation, which is a collection enclosed in these curly braces of label value. Label and then a value, which happens to be an array in this case. We know it's an array because it's enclosed in the square braces. And even here, label and value. The value here happens to be a function. So you'll need to get used to that, because essentially this whole file is constructed in that way, where it is label, value, each pair being separated by a comma. So keep that in mind as you work with these files, that you need to keep that structure in place, otherwise you'll get some errors. And we'll actually cause an error to happen so we can see how you know that you've done something wrong. But I can come into this file here that's in Argos SalesLogix, and I can change stuff if I want to. For example, I can change the account name. Instead of using the variable account text, I could just put in a hard-coded value of company and save that. And if I were to go and look in my Argos SalesLogix system, I'm going to refresh it here. So I changed that label pretty easily. The problem with how I've done that, though, is I've modified the out-of-the-box code. So if there's changes from Sage and there's an upgrade that needs to happen, now I have this big merging mess that I have to deal with. And there's an easier way to do that to avoid that upgrade hassle, and that's using what's called an application module. The Argos sample that we looked at, it uses an application module to layer the customizations on top of the out-of-the-box customizations. So that's the way we want to do things. It's not that it's any harder or easier. It takes a little bit of extra things to understand, but the most difficult part with creating an application module is setting up this product folder in the first place. If I look at the Argos sample right here, it has a lot of different folders and things in them. It has these configuration files here. It has a build folder. The build for this purpose is minifying it, getting it ready for production and small in size. It also has source of some of the application module itself. So there's a lot of different files that make up that, and I can, if I want to, go to the Argos SDK repository on GitHub, go to the wiki, and there is an article there about creating an application module. And we can look at this and figure out how to create an application module and all of those folders and go and create them. We could certainly do that. The Mobile Developer Toolkit, though, does also do that for us. So it's a few more things, manual things that you don't need to worry about doing. In the Mobile Developer Toolkit, there is an option here for Create New Product. Again, product referring to a set of customizations. So I'm going to click that, and now I get to point to an existing development environment. I'm just going to point right to the root of it, and again, choose the version and whatever I want to name this product. For example, the Argos sample is called, this product name is sample. They're always prefixed with Argos. That's less of a requirement in newer versions of the mobile framework, but that's still kind of the convention that is used, is to prefix all those product names with Argos. So I'm going to call mine, I'll just leave it at custom. So I'll call my product custom, and here's where I'm going to put it, and I'm going to leave it at 1.2 to match my development environment. And now I'm going to click Create Product, and it's doing a few different things for me. Let's go and take a look real quick here. So if I look in my products folder, first off I see this new folder here called Argos Custom. Custom was the name of our product that we created. And inside there I have a build folder, I have a configuration folder, and I have my source folder, which contains my application module. This is my starting point of what I need to do. So everything we've gone through up to this point are steps that need to happen before you can write code. If you're using the Mobile Developer Toolkit, which I would recommend it by far, it saves a lot of manual stuff, all that came down to is the clicking of two different buttons. One to create the development environment, one to create your custom product. Those two clicks of a button got you to the point where now you can actually start writing some code. So let's look at one other thing here. If we go back to the root of our development environment, I do have another thing here that the toolkit created that is a batch file that will allow me to build my custom product and since minify it. So all of that was already done for me. Let's actually look at where you go to start creating some of the customizations. So I'm going to go into my custom here and go into my source. Now the configuration here, I don't ever need to mess with this. This is just constructed in a way that it'll inherit whatever the configuration for production and development is from the Argos SalesLogix system. So I don't really ever need to mess with those. If I want to change my URL for my development S-Data portal, I would do that in the Argos SalesLogix configuration. So let's open up the source and open up this application module. Now again, an application module is a layer that sits on top of another system. I'm going to layer this application module on top of Argos SalesLogix to customize what's already there. This is how the toolkit created it, with one little sample customization in here already in place, so you kind of know where to start. This customization right here, it takes the type field and relabels it as type X. So if we want to test that and make sure that what we have already is working and in place, I'll go ahead and bring up this Start Mobile website, and now it shows this new product that we created called Argos Custom. And if I click Start Dev on that, it'll go ahead and launch it in the browser. So here you'll notice here my URL now says index-dev-custom.html. So when I use this URL, I'm loading that custom product in on top of Argos SalesLogix. So I'm going to just log in here, and if what we did worked, then I should be able to go to an account and see type X. I'm still seeing this company label that we changed here because we modified the out-of-the-box source, which, just to not confuse us with that, I'm going to go and change that back. Okay. So I do see my type label was changed from type to type X because that custom product now layered on top of the Argos SalesLogix system told it to do that. So let's put in a few other simple little tweaks to our customization, to our application module, and then we'll take a look at where do you go to even find out what you type in that file. This little bit of code right here, this is what changed that label from type to type X. That's simple enough to, if we look at it, but you had to know what to type to do that. And we'll look at how you figure that out and where you can go to find out some of those details. So just to look at this, what this is doing is this is registering a customization for the detail form that's named account_detail. And then it's doing this customization. It's looking for the row at where the row name equals type. And then the type of customization it's doing is it's modifying that row. And then here's the value of what it's modifying. The label it's modifying to type X. So let's match that up with how that got to this label right here. Okay, so we have this account detail already open from Argos SalesLogix. So this is the detail file, the screen we were just looking at. So if I scroll down a little bit to the view properties, I'll see that it has an ID of account_detail. That's how we knew what the form name was we were wanting to customize. And then this to locate a row called type, well, how did we even know it was called type? If we scroll down to find that type field, right here, it has a name of type. This row is a name of type, and if we look right here where row.name equals type. So that's how we knew what we wanted to find. Then the rest is the instruction of what we're doing there. And let's open up the Argos SDK Wiki. So if we go to Argos SDK on GitHub, go to the Wiki, and then we're going to look at this page called Customizing an Existing Application. Now this page has a lot of text on it, so it's not like a easy list of here's your choices. You kind of have to read and dig them out of some of the paragraphs here. But if we scroll through there, it's talking about registered customization, and this registered customization, good, that's what we need. So it gives a sample of it. This sample, though, if you notice, it doesn't look anything like the code we had. If we flip back over to our code, we have this ext.namespace, and our code just looks all different than what's in here. So the difference is we're looking at the version 2.0 mobile code in this article. What we have is mobile 1.2. Mobile 2.0 is something that we'll use in a later version. If you've started to go to version 8, then you can use mobile 2.0 with that. There is some compatibility issues with older versions of SalesLogix and mobile 2.0, and that's why we're using 1.2 here. Now, I can go on this wiki page here and see previous versions of this wiki as the 1.2 information. If I look at this page history here, I'll see that right here, the last update to this page was they updated it for Dojo. Dojo is that keyword you want to look for when you're trying to find the information that relates to either 2.0 mobile or 1.2 mobile. 1.2 is what you likely have already in place if you're using mobile. And so if the last update changed that page to match Dojo, meaning 2.0, we want to just go what was there before that. So we're going to click here to go to the previous version of that page. Now if we scroll down, this looks a little bit more familiar with what we had on our customization. This is looking a little bit more like what we had. So now we're seeing information that's relevant to 1.2 version of mobile. So if we scroll down, we can see a little sample here, and we'll start to pick out that the type property can be one of 4 values: remove, replace, modify, insert. So in our customization here, we had modify, but the other 3 choices are remove, insert, and replace. And then we can also scroll down to see a few other things like the where property has values available of before or after. So we didn't even use the where here, but this page here is going to be your most valuable page in starting out with at least understanding what to even type in these application modules. Let's put a couple of other samples in just so we can see what some different variation of customizations and how you put them into this file here. Let's go back to this page, the actual mobile site here, right here. Okay, so let's first remove this web address. We're not even going to use that, so let's take that out. So what we want to do is we're going to register a customization. And we're going to register this on the detail form that is named account detail. Oops. And we're going to be looking for that row called for the web address. And how do we know what we're looking for? Let's look back over to the detail form that's in the Argos SalesLogix system, and we can find web address. It has a name of web address. One thing to point out here also is that the names, these also correspond to the property names of the entity in your SData feed as well. So this not only is this row named web address, it uses that also to know what property from SData is it binding to this area on the screen. So we're going to look for the row name of web address, and when we find a match on that, then we want to remove it. So flipping back over this page here, we know that the types of customization is remove, replace, modify, insert. In our case, we're just going to remove it. So our type is going to be remove. And that's all we need. If we read a little bit more detail there, we'll notice that remove is a full stop operation. Once it sees that you're removing it, it doesn't even care what's after it. So we don't even need to put anything else. All we need to do is tell it to remove that line. So I'm going to save what we have, and then let's go back and refresh our mobile client. And again, we're using the custom product customization. That's what we see in the URL here. So we can now see that web address is gone. That was easy enough to do that. Now let's look at one other kind of customization. Let's add a new row. Add a new row, we're going to have to do a couple of different things. First of all, we're going to have to tell it what we're adding. Second, we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, let's add in the code for adding something. Let's look at just the raw SData feed and just see what properties we have available. This is just the accounts list in JSON format here. So let's look at this here. Let's use we'll use territory. Territory is something that's available on the account entity. It's not showing on the screen right now. Let's add it. So let's go back over here, and we're going to register a customization again. Now we're going to be looking just like before. We're looking for that row. Oh, look what row we're looking for. Let's look at that. The row we're looking for here, we have to look for somewhere to put this. Let's put it down here in the more details section, right below industry. So we're going to fit it right in between industry and business description. To do that, we have to look for something before or after it, so we can tell it to insert before or after this. So what we're going to do is look for industry, so we can say we're going to put our customization after that. So if we go back over to the detail and we look at what industry is called, it's just called industry. So that's what we're going to look for here, where our row name is industry. And then our type of customization, which it said those 4 choices on that page, one of them was insert. And then we need to tell it, we've located this row and we're telling it we're inserting something. We need to tell it where we want to insert. On that page it listed 2 choices for where, before or after. So we're going to say after. And now we need to just provide it with the values of what we're inserting. So the value, we'll close those in curly braces here, and then we'll have a name of territory. Again, the name needs to match what the SData property is. And the label we'll put as just territory. And then the type of thing we're inserting is just a text thing. So we're going to, again, we could go back to that page and see what our choices are for type. But our type here is just going to be that it's a text object, and that's what we'll put there. And that looks right. And we've added that area of the screen correct, but let's go and refresh it and take a look at it. Okay, so let's look at the more details. Territory is there, but it's blank. Let's look at Abbott Limited in that SData feed there. Well, actually, let's look at whoever this first one is. First America. It has a territory of Northeast. So let's go look at First America. Okay, so if we look at First America here, it has a value of Northeast, but it's not showing up here. So first thing we will want to do is we can always, if things aren't working as we're expecting it to, we'll bring up the developer tools in whatever browser we're using. I'm using Chrome, so Control-Shift-I will bring up my developer tools, or I can use the menu here and go to Tools, Developer Tools. And this console is going to be very handy because it's going to tell us whenever there's an error that happened. You're not going to see errors popping up on the screen and things like that, but you will see an error in the console. This is an example of that. If we were to take off this ending curly brace right here and save and then refresh, we'll see already that there's been a problem here on line number 37 of our application module. It's unexpected token. So we know we've mistyped something there. So the console is going to be very useful for knowing when you've typed something wrong because of those errors that'll show up. So I fixed the problem. Nothing's showing up here. If we look at the out-of-the-box detail form and scroll up to the top here, we'll see this thing called a query select. This is where it's gathering the data that it's binding to this form. Territory is not in this list. So if you think of this as a SQL statement, these are all the fields that it's selecting. So obviously ours is blank because it hasn't selected that territory field as part of it. So how do we get that in there? Let's do that real quick. We want to append or concatenate in territory into this list of fields that it's getting for our page. So the customization for that looks a little bit different because what we have to do is we have to override this query select to be able to add something new into this array of fields that's in there. We want to concatenate a new value into that array. So to override it, the syntax is a little bit different. I'm going to do ext, and again, I mentioned that Argos sample. Great place to find out how to do this stuff. We can go look at the code in the application module for Argos sample and see perfect examples of how to do all of these kind of things. For example, if I were to go, let's actually just flip over to Argos sample on GitHub, even if I didn't install it in my development environment. If I were to look at, go to source, application module, here again the code is different. I see words like Dojo, which means I'm looking at version 2.0 mobile stuff. So let's flip the branch here from master to 1.2. Now I'll see the 1.2 version of that file. But I can look through here and find all kinds of examples of how to do this exact kind of thing. If I were to just search for query select, I'd find, here's a sample right here. What they're doing is they're doing this ext override. Here's the object that they're overriding, and here's the property on that object that the override is for, and they're concatenating these two fields. So that's exactly what we want to do. So what we want to do is the ext override, and then what we're overriding, if we look back here at the detail, go up to the top here, this mobile SalesLogix account detail is the name of it. That's what we're overriding. We're kind of extending that. I'm going to override the query select part of it. And we're going to look for query select. We're going to take the existing query select and concatenate a value into it. Okay, so what this means is we're overriding this object here, and we're going to override this property in that object, and we're going to override it with this value. We're taking the existing query select and concatenating into that territory. So now, territory is now an element of that array of all those fields it's going to select. So then, when we set this control up here, that'll exist in the data that it's appending onto this page, and should all look just great. Let's refresh it and make sure that it worked. We'll go down to our more details, and oh, it's not showing it up at all. So we have an error. Let's actually bring up our console. Unexpected token. Oh, I put an extra semicolon where it wasn't supposed to be one, which is this one right here. Again, like I mentioned, object literal notation, label, value, separated by commas. We don't need that there. So I'll refresh this, and something else is wrong here. Cannot read property, query selective undefined. So I've mistyped something else. Oh, I've missed my account.detail, and the rest looks okay. And no more errors, so I'll just close out the console there. And there's our territory, and it is showing the value for it. So we successfully added a new field into our query that's being retrieved for this page, added a field, we removed a field and renamed one. So the idea being that two places you'll want to focus on when you're getting started, first of all, the Argos SDK Wiki. This page we were looking at, customizing an existing application, will be tremendously useful for you. And also looking at the SalesLogix or Argos sample product. If I go into there in the source, I'll see that application module. If I open it up, it'll look similar to the stuff we were typing, although there's a lot more there. but it's easy enough to look at this and kind of figure out what it's doing. I can look at this. Oh, this is inserting a new row before the add note with this stuff that it's adding to it. So it's easy enough to look at this and figure out what it's doing, and that at least gives you an idea of what you need to type. That's the hardest part with getting some of this stuff customized, is just knowing where you can look for some help. So those are the two places that I found has been the most useful. The Mobile Developer Toolkit also at some point will have some lists of articles. There's this Get Mobile Information here, which will take you to a web page that'll list. I'll start to collect all the useful places that I find for customizing mobile, and hopefully have a big list there, and free to have other people suggest content for that as well. But that concludes what we were going to show in our webcast for today. I hope it's been useful. Just as a quick review before we end here, if you wanted to get that Mobile Developer Toolkit, if you just go to customereffect.com, click Power to Software, and then the SalesLogix Mobile Developer Toolkit. That's where you can get that from. And again, idea being to automate some of those tedious steps you have to take to even get to the point where you can write in code. So I'll open it up if there's any questions before we sign off here. Brianna, I haven't been watching if there's questions coming in or not, so you'll have to let me know if there's some that are waiting for me.
Ryan, right now we don't have any questions. However, if any of you out there come up with a question, please feel free to send me an email, brianna.ojard@customerfx.com. You can just do a reply to the email that was sent to you regarding this workshop, or info@customerfx.com. Either of those will work. We'll get your questions, hopefully get them answered. But right now, Ryan, no questions. So I want to thank you, Ryan, for your time today, and thank you everyone out there for joining us.